We're going to get started in a moment. Okay. Good evening from the Foreign Correspondents Club of Thailand in Bangkok. Very pleased to welcome you all. We're going to get started in just a moment. We have a number of speakers who have joined us online, and of course we have a number of speakers in the House to talk about the very important issues related to the international campaign to ban landmines. 25th anniversary is this year. Also to talk about particularly how it impacts in the neighbor next door, Myanmar, which is one of the two governments that are still using landmines and continually been seen as abusing that, the spread of landmines. I'd like to ask at the outset for Ambassador Sarah Taylor from Canada, who's to come up, and she's going to speak from the podium here to give a few introductory remarks before we get into the actual panel. So, Ambassador Taylor, please come on up.
Thanks very much, Phil, and good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to join you here tonight for this important celebration. So, sawadee ka to everyone, and mingalawa. And really pleased to be able to join you for this 25th anniversary of the signing of the Ottawa Convention on landmines. And I think a great moment to both to celebrate what's been done and to look back on some past accomplishments, but also to think about ongoing work and what remains to be done. And I think we'll be hearing a bit about that later on, including in relation to Myanmar. I am the Ambassador of Canada to Thailand, Laos, and Cambodia. So amongst other things, I have the distinction, I guess, of being ambassador to a couple of what remain the most heavily mined and unexploded ordnance affected countries in the world. And so both because of that and of course because of the importance that Canada continues to attach to the Ottawa Convention, I'm very pleased to be able to join you here today and to talk about some of our ongoing efforts in this area. It would be nice to think that after 25 years that this was all past history and that we were done with demining, but unfortunately that is not the case. So I think it's important for us to remember that the campaign against landmines remains relevant today, and particularly so in relation to Myanmar. And if I can just right up front to say that the Canadian government joins others in regretting and condemning the fact that the crisis in Myanmar continues to exact a very high price in suffering and dislocation for people in Myanmar, including, as I understand it, a renewed use of landmines, but in many other aspects as well. And we really look forward to a day when events such as this one and more generally the work to support the people of Myanmar take place in a more peaceful, stable, and democratic environment. So with that, let me just say, again, a few words about the past history as we mark the 25th anniversary of December 1997, which saw representatives of 122 countries come to Canada bravely, to Ottawa in December, some of them with no winter coats, to sign the Ottawa Convention. And I think support for the convention at the time was strong because in those days, in 1997, landmines were killing or maiming in the order of 26,000 people a year. And civil society and many governments rightly got together to say this is unacceptable. But it's maybe easy for us to forget now, 25 years on, how exceptional that was at the time. Because up until then, most work on arms control and disarmament had really focused on so-called weapons of mass destruction, on nuclear weapons, on chemical and biological weapons. So weapons which obviously posed horrible threats, if ever used, that the implications of those weapons were dreadful. But at the same time, as all that attention was being placed on those potential or theoretical threats, very little was being done about things that were actually killing and maiming people right here, right now, as the saying had it. And I was very privileged at the time, actually. I was working in the office of our then Minister of Foreign Affairs, Lloyd Axworthy, who was very aware of the campaign to ban landmines, and I think found that it aligned more broadly with an approach that he wanted to bring to Canadian foreign policy, which was a so-called human security approach. And that was a very interesting lens, if you like, to place on a broad range of foreign policy challenges of the day, because it said, when we set our priorities, because work in government is always about setting priorities, because there's always more issues out there than you can possibly ever address and work on. So when we're setting our priorities, let's look at the human aspect and the human security aspect. What are the problems that are affecting human beings in their daily lives the most? What are the things that are causing the most harm and the greatest threats? And once you took that perspective, that suddenly landmines, rather than being this sort of minor, lesser issue, came right up to the top of the list, because nobody was being killed by nuclear weapons, horrible the prospects of them were, and yet, again, 26,000 people a year killed and maimed by landmines. So I think it was, to me, one of the most interesting and most successful examples of how a change in your perspective and your policy, your higher level policy, then had a very practical, direct implication. So focusing on that very simple truth about what was killing people, what was hurting people, helped to reshape perceptions and norms, and gave rise to a new set of international obligations that recognized that landmines, and the use of landmines, was unacceptable. Now, I know that's adherence to that norm is not universal, and again, we'll probably hear more about that today. But I think we did succeed in shifting the goalposts in terms of what was seen as acceptable or desirable in this area. And it was out of that process of a change in perception and of moving the goalposts that the Ottawa Convention arose, and also a very innovative approach to disarmament. Because until then, also, disarmament had tended to be something that was carried out mainly by diplomats and a few military types, behind closed doors in rooms in Geneva or New York, and very abstract discussions. This was the first time where we had what was much more of a sort of grassroots, bottom-up disarmament exercise, and a real partnership with not only amongst governments, but then with civil society and advocates from outside government. And I think you see the strongest evidence of that is the fact that the campaign to ban landmines then became recipients of the Nobel Peace Prize because they were rightly seen as actually the main drivers. They were the ones who raised the temperature, if you like, on this issue to such a degree that then governments really had to look at it. And I think it's been something that has continued to characterize the efforts against landmines is this close collaboration between government and civil society that continues to this day. So again, huge congratulations to Jody Williams and the International Campaign to Ban Landmines for their outstanding work, because of course this also means not only is it the 25th anniversary of the convention, but the 25th anniversary of their Nobel Peace Prize. But it wasn't just Jody and her group. I mean, their work had over 1,000 organizations in 60 countries supporting them. So this really was a grassroots effort. And again, the results are not perfect, and we'll hear more about where some of the gaps are tonight. But I think it really did represent multilateralism at its best. An international agreement that addresses not just the immediate harms and dangers that there were at the time from landmines, but also the wider social instability that they caused and the wider implications of that. And the preamble of the convention says that very clearly. It wanted to put an end to the suffering and the casualties caused by anti-personnel mines, and that was coupled with a recognition of also the economic harm and impact of mining large swathes of country. And since then, it's important to look at what progress has been made in these 25 years. So we now have roughly 80% of the world's governments have joined the Ottawa Convention. So again, still a bit of room for more, but a pretty strong record for an international convention. Mine casualties have been declining almost universally within all the states parties to the convention. So in virtually every of those 80% of countries, one of the practical impacts of joining the convention has been to see the number of casualties go down. In those 25 years, over 55 million weapons have been destroyed. So that's 55 million fewer objects in the ground that might kill or injure. And we have 32 states parties to the Ottawa Convention that are now completely mine-free. So again, still lots of work to do, but a very substantial step towards a mine-free world, which is the ultimate goal of the convention. And in the past few years, which have been difficult years for everyone with the pandemic, nonetheless, demining has continued, and we've seen hundreds of kilometers of land cleared of landmines and returned to productive use. And I've seen that in the conversations I've had in my role as ambassador with demining authorities in Cambodia and here in Thailand, both of whom are aiming to be mine-free by 2025. So that work is continuing on. Now, again, still important to note there are still challenges and regions in the areas in the countries of the region, Laos, Cambodia, and Myanmar particularly, where there are many people who are still affected by the presence and effects of landmines. And of course, goes without saying that there is an equal and perhaps even more intractable problem in unexploded ordnance, particularly for Laos and Cambodia. So even being mine-free there does not mean an end to their problems. But nonetheless, very important progress with maybe just a few areas of recent backsliding. And in that respect, in particular, we deplore the widespread use of mines by Russia in Ukraine. Clearly, along with many other breaches of international law, this is yet another one that we have seen as part of Russia's illegal and unjustified invasion of Ukraine. And of course, also very concerned about the use of landmines in Myanmar. And again, I will leave that to some of the members of the panel who I think are going to speak about that in more depth. Canada remains committed to working in this area. And in fact, just a few weeks ago, during the ASEAN summit, I was pleased and honored to welcome our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, to Cambodia for the ASEAN summit, and then following that to Thailand for the APEC summit. And in the course of those visits, the Prime Minister made a number of important announcements around the launch of a new Indo-Pacific strategy by the Government of Canada. And included as part of that was a renewed commitment to demining. So while in Cambodia, he announced new funding that's of almost $1 million Canadian dollars. That was $750,000 to help build demining capacity in Laos by establishing comprehensive standards for landmine clearance and supporting recruitment, training, and supervision of personnel to ensure the safety of demining activities in Laos. Then we have another project, $190,000, that will be part of a joint project with some other funders to accelerate mine clearance in Cambodia, aiming to reduce the risks from landmines, including by delivering training so that women can safely participate in demining activities, and also by leveraging some Canadian expertise to help with faster and more effective mine clearance in Cambodia. And last but not least, a smaller but important grant of $50,000 to an NGO training project in Cambodia to help them training their personnel to a higher level to advance their efforts to clear landmines, and again with part of the focus being on recruiting and training more women. And those are our newest commitments, but they complement long-standing work that we've done, including through our Canada Fund for small grants to support civil society in demining efforts in all the countries of the region. And in addition to helping to support the demining priorities of those governments, we've worked to support victims of landmines directly as well. And we've supported indirectly through helping the work of fund the work of partners such as UNDP, the Cambodian Mine Action Authority, and the Mine Action Group. And all of that, of course, is complemented by what we do on an ongoing basis in partnership at the international level. So we continue to partner with the International Campaign to Ban Landmines, the Geneva International Center for Humanitarian Demining, Norwegian People's Aid, and some of the other key players. And obviously tonight we're focused on the Mekong subregion, but we continue to support demining efforts in many other countries as well: Afghanistan, Iraq, Sri Lanka, Mali, Colombia, Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Ukraine. And I think also important to add that in every one of these efforts, from the very start of this, from the development and implementation of the international agreement that formed the Ottawa Convention, through to the ongoing support we provide today, that we work very hard to ensure that women are fully engaged in this process and to strengthen gender inclusion in mine action and in the application of international conventions. This is a top priority for Canada, not just in the area of landmines, but more generally across the whole spectrum of women, peace, and security activities. So I will just end by saying a few words about Myanmar. Again, I know there are others who are much more expert on Myanmar than I am. I am not the ambassador to Myanmar, but I did want to say that we as a country and a government remain very concerned about the reports of continuing use of anti-personnel landmines in Myanmar. We've called on the Myanmar military to stop immediately in their use, and also by use by non-state actors, and we've joined with many other voices in calling for an end to the laying of new mines or the use of mines by both state and non-state actors. Because we all know what this will mean. It will mean not only casualties now, but also a delay to the return to villages, a delay in a return to productive livelihoods. And so the health, the social, and the economic impact of the current conflict will continue on, will multiply and will continue over years to come. And that's really, when you get down to it, is part of the rationale for the original convention in the first place, is that these are weapons that not just kill and maim now, but they have an impact for years and years to come. So eventually we hope there will be a brighter point in Myanmar's future when this is no longer the case there. And at that point in the future, we hope very much to welcome a new government in Myanmar, signing to have Myanmar join as a state party to the Ottawa Convention. So that may be some way off in the future, and again, we'll hear from others about what is happening right now, but it remains our hope and our goal for Myanmar, and our hope that all the countries in the region will be successful in their efforts to become mine-free. Thank you very much. Khop khun mak.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Taylor, for that very comprehensive overview of not only the issues related to the Ottawa Convention and its origins, but also the work that Canada continues to do to support the Ottawa Convention. My name is Phil Robertson. I'm the Deputy Director of the Asia Division of Human Rights Watch. Human Rights Watch, along with HI, is one of the co-founders of the ICBL, and very proud to say that we have the Nobel Prize plaque hanging in our conference room in New York, in the Empire State Building. It's a great deal of pride that we feel to be involved with the ICBL. And so when Yeshua and others came to me to say that they wanted to organize this evening, I was very pleased to do so. And we've got an excellent panel with us to speak about the issues not only of the Ottawa Convention, but also its impact in this neighborhood, particularly in Myanmar. I'd like to ask, actually, Yeshua, since you're the man who's in the clubhouse, to come on up. We're going to start our panel with Mr. Tom Andrews, who is the Special Rapporteur of the on human rights in Myanmar for the UN Human Rights Council. He is also a former member of the U.S. Congress from Maine. He is actually a senior human rights fellow at Yale University Law School. He is someone who is well-versed not only in the issues of landmines and humanitarian issues, but also, of course, what is happening in Myanmar. And I want to ask him to speak first because I know he has some time limitations. He's got to leave us at 8 p.m. his time. So, Tom, why don't you start speaking about not only why the mine ban treaty is important from a human rights perspective, but also some of your observations about what is going on with landmines in Myanmar. Yeah, I think you're muted.
Okay.
There you are.
Yes, okay. Thank you so much, Phil. And thank you for the opportunity, everybody, for me to be a participant in this very important panel speaking about this very important topic. I was honored to participate in the International Campaign to Ban Landmines event some years ago in Phnom Penh, and to be able to meet and engage with many of those who had become disabled as a result of landmines and who are committed to confronting the many barriers that disabled people face. And I was surprised, frankly, that when I arrived in Cambodia, I'd been there for several weeks, and I had seen very few people with disabilities. And I was told this was because of a very severe condition of prejudice and discrimination that disabled people were facing. And I was particularly interested because I lost my right leg several years ago and ran a civil rights organization for disabled people in the United States. And it was clear after engaging with and learning from members of the disability community in Cambodia that indeed the greatest disabler of disabled survivors of landmines is not an amputated limb, but the barriers of social prejudice and discrimination that all too many disabled people face. I'm very grateful and in awe of the extremely important work that's being done by researchers, by advocates, by humanitarians working on landmine policy, on clearance, on risk education, on victim assistance, including those on this panel. As the UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Myanmar, this issue is particularly relevant. While notable progress has been made globally, as Ambassador Taylor noted, the junta of Myanmar's military forces has continued to lay landmines over the last year, according to the 2022 landmine monitor. According to the report, the Russian military has the dubious distinction of also laying landmines in the last year. And of course, this is not surprising. The junta and Russian leaders maintain very close relations, and as I've noted in a report on the sources of weapons that the junta is using to attack villagers and civilians throughout Myanmar, Russia is among the largest. Indeed, the landmine monitor has implicated Myanmar in the use of landmines every year since it was first published in 1999. This is a long-standing problem in Myanmar. So while new landmine use is very rare, thank goodness globally, thanks in large part to the incredible work by organizations and networks represented in this event, it is very common and extremely deadly in Myanmar. Since the military coup of last year, Myanmar has unleashed a war on the people of Myanmar. Many different tactics are being used to attack and target civilians, the shelling of villages with heavy artillery, aerial attacks from jets and helicopters, ground assaults from soldiers, massive campaigns of arson, where more than 38,000 homes and buildings have been burned, and of course, the use of landmines. Indeed, there has been a significant increase in the use of landmines since the coup. The concern is not only the increasing number of landmines that are being used, that is the concern that I have, but the footprint of landmine contamination that has expanded massively since the coup. This now includes areas that had not previously experienced landmine use, particularly Sagaing and Magway regions and Chin State. Landmines have been found or detonated in or around churches and monasteries, schools, villages, homes, farms, paths used by civilians on a regular basis, bodies of people killed in military raids. A human rights defender told me, and I quote, I'm going to quote him, whenever the military reaches to a village or town, they will lay mines there. They lay the mines on the road, the entrances to the villages, the doors of the houses, everywhere around the village. We went to one village and saw that there were 16 landmines in one village. When you step on the mine, it cuts your legs or your arms. We are seeing an increase in people becoming disabled because of the landmines. Many people are also being killed, unquote. I've also been told of soldiers preventing civilians injured by landmines from being treated at local hospitals, presumably because the military thinks that they may be sympathetic to the opposition or opposition figures themselves. According to UN statistics, there have been 574 casualties from landmines since the beginning of last year. The military's expanded use of landmines has likely contributed to the decision by some non-state armed groups to also use landmines, making the situation for increasing numbers of people in Myanmar even more perilous. The impact on women and children has been particularly terrible. The percentage of landmine victims that are women has increased since the coup, likely reflecting the increased use of landmines in civilian areas. Landmines impact women's travel, their livelihoods, their access to medical care, their ability to care for their families. My report on the impact of the Myanmar crisis on children addressed the particular threat posed by landmines and unexploded ordnances on children. They include the impact on children's ability to play, attend school, access medical care, reports of children playing with mines when they come across them or with unexploded ordnances. These children are more likely to die from these weapons when triggered, and these weapons are also killing or injuring their parents and caregivers. 176 child landmine casualties have occurred in Myanmar since 2021. The scourge of landmines are part of the daily nightmare that has become life for so many in Myanmar. Prior to the coup, I called on the government of Myanmar to ratify the mine ban treaty. And while the junta, of course, has no interest in ratifying the treaty, they lack the legitimacy to do so in any case. It is why it is so imperative for the world to take meaningful action to help Myanmar people to end this nightmare, and for a legitimate democratic government to ratify this treaty and then work with the international community, including the organizations represented here, to rid Myanmar of this scourge once and for all. Thank you so much for inviting me to participate in today's panel.
Thank you very much, Tom, for that heartfelt statement. Very important and very concerning that the situation of landmines is contributing to the tragedies that we're already seeing in Myanmar. Next, we're going to hear from Mr. Thun Chanaret. He is an ICBL ambassador. He is also a Cambodian double amputee landmine survivor, and he was the one who accepted the Nobel for the international campaign to ban landmines in Oslo in 1997. I want to ask him to speak about his experience as a landmine survivor, why he joined the campaign, and what it's done for him and other survivors. So the floor is yours, Chanaret.
Thank you very much that you invite me for to talk or to speak to right now. But I try to summarize a little bit because from the background of my history is too long. So what I want to start after the killing field, I can say that Pol Pot regime, that is 1979, that I tried to move back to the capital of Cambodia, Phnom Penh, and I sent my mom and my younger sister in Phnom Penh. But I tried my best to escape from Cambodia because at that time, I don't know exactly how many anti-personnel landmines under the ground. But I tried to escape to Cambodian-Thailand border because Cambodian-Thailand border, we have United Nations try to support for the people who need peace, justice, and food. But when I arrived there, I begged loss because United Nations just only try to support for the female, but for all the male have nothing at all. But from my side, stomach need, body need to support. I must become a soldier. After I became a soldier, it was in April 1979 until 18 December 1982, that the date that I stood on anti-personnel landmines. I really big loss, especially my life fought, because I don't know where is hope, where is the future. And at that time, my wife still pregnant, the first child. What I should to do the best for my family. Afterward, we tried to move because attacks area in Cambodia is so heavy. And that time we have Vietnamese army. They try to collect us. They try to bring us back to Cambodia, but I don't want because I knew exactly the communist regime already killed the people. But another way, I follow the UN, how they can support us, how they can bring us to the safe area. But lucky that they sent us to the camp inside the Thailand because Saitu camp. And I living there without hope, without future. But we have non-government organization to support, for to train the skill, for to give the food, very best for Cambodian refugee in the camp. But we are so sad because just only 4 kilometers for 40,000 families that living in that camp. But we are lucky because in 1993, when United Nations straight to the Cambodian country, and then they make announcement for the people and the refugee camp repatriation back to Cambodia. I'm one person who would like to come back to Cambodia because we have no choice to continue to another country. When I come back, at that time I have 5 children, and my wife pregnant, the last one. What I should to do the best, how I can encourage my family to get better. When I arrived Cambodian on March, I really big loss. I really big loss because Cambodian at that time, every minute, one explosion. We don't know exactly children, female or male children or old or adult, we don't know. But every minute, one explosion. What I should to do the best, how I can escape from that issues, just only to find the work, the way how to have the job to support the family, to responsible. But lucky for me, very, very small lucky, because I can find one job to do that is JSP Refugee Service, I asked her what job to do, and she sent me directly to wheelchair workshop production. I worked the first month, second, and third. And my boss, she's a nun. She called me and talked with me that do you continue to work with the wheelchair forever? You know, disabled like me, if I'm not thinking about salary, what I should do in Cambodian at that time. You know, I just only answered to her that yes, it's true that I want salary. I want to produce the wheelchair for the people in Cambodia to use, because at that time, so many handicapped people, they move the body on the ground without wheelchair or prosthesis. They got, but they did by their own, you know, like artillery, bullet or something like that. They try to produce by their own, and then they use it. But the second time, when I successful how to design all the wheelchair and distribute for the people in Cambodia to use, and she called me again to join with the landmine campaign in Cambodia. I said, sorry, I cannot do. Because in that time, everybody, they have pocket gun, grenades, everything in their hand. You know, if I make a mistake, 1 second my wife will die, I'm die, and my wife is responsible. But she is very smart. She said, God will be responsible. Can you tell me where is the God? You know, but the way that I try to help myself and next help our people in Cambodia that we got suffer many long way. So I must to follow her, because she is a man brand that trying to encourage to develop Cambodia. So I tell you true. And I try to continue with her to ban anti-personal landmine, really scary for me, but I try my best. First, I try to find a witness from the grassroots, from our government, from the high commander. At the end, I asked the King Norodom Sihanouk to give us the witness, and he gave us with his own signature. It was 1995, and he declared at that time that Cambodia no more using mine, no more transfer mine, demo and clear the lands for the people who need to use. And at the end, he declared and he said that give more support for victims, for people with disability at that time. And we clap the hand, we are very happy. And I think, at that time, I think that the job is finished, but very opposite. Because after we finish in Cambodia, we have non-government organization, we have government support, collaboration with the United Nations, start to clean the area, especially the land that the people need to use. And I hope that finish no more. But at the end, my boss sent me overseas to announcement all the people around the world, tell them the real story about Cambodian suffer by landmine and cluster munitions and non-exploded everywhere around the world. We start from 1994 until the very long way and very hard jobs, especially cool weather like a snowing that I never seen, you know. So I just only try my best how to promote to ban landmine until the end. And we got successful. We have Jody Williams, we have Steve Bruce, we have Casa here and online, and we have other many people in the Ottawa Treaty. We got at the time we got 122 countries signed to support to ban anti-personal landmines. I don't want to talk about Nobel Peace Prize because everybody knew already about that. I just only talk a little bit that I think that is finished, no more, but still going on, you know, still along the way that we need every country to join to ban anti-personal landmine right now. Our job, we need to finish 2025 quickly because we cannot extension, we cannot delay, we cannot escape from that story. When I heard about our neighbor nearby Cambodia, Myanmar, I really upset Why did Myanmar government got blind or get blind? Did he know exactly that Cambodian country injury, many people injured by anti-personnel landmine? Why he want to use? Why he bought to kill their own people? That is bad. Why he doesn't love their own people. We are love our human being. We live the same world. We want everywhere have a peaceful, especially I try my best with our team, ICBL, CMC. We want peace in our global. We don't want any kind of the weapon. I would like to an announcement for the people who are still working in the factory. Please stop. Please stop doing. We must do something. We must do another thing to get the world better. We don't want any kind of the weapon. We don't want any more of anti-personnel landmine or cluster bomb or killer robot or armed threat or nuclear weapon. We don't want it. We need happiness. We need justice. We need peaceful, especially peaceful from our heart. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, that's a very heartfelt cry to demand an end to the use of landmines, to end the use of these kind of destructive weapons. And we greatly appreciate your time to share your experiences. Next, we're going to hear from Ms. Kasia Derlika Rosenbauer. She's the government liaison and policy manager of the International Campaign to Ban Landmines. And she's going to talk a little bit about the Landmine Monitor, what it's meant to the International Campaign to Ban Landmines, and also the global effort that is being done right now to ban anti-personnel mines. So, Kasia, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all of you for the opportunity of being on this panel, especially to our dear colleague and friend Yeshua for organizing this and giving us opportunity to celebrate, reflect, and re-energize together to achieve a mine-free world that we all have been working for. So before I jump into the monitor, I just want to again dive a bit into the history and tell you a few more words about the International Campaign to Ban Landmines that I have an honor and pleasure to work for. So as the ambassador mentioned before, it all started as a grassroots movement, actually very much in the region. We believe that the cradle of the movement was really Cambodian and Thai border in the 80s, when humanitarian workers, medical staff saw this horrifying suffering and toll that landmines have caused on the population moving across the border. And this all led to the formal foundation of the organization of the campaign in 1992 by 6 founding organizations, and we've already mentioned that it was Handicap International, Human Rights Watch, which we have a pleasure to also have today with us on the panel, as well as Medico International, Mines Advisory Group, Physicians for Human Rights, and the Vietnam Veteran American Foundation. From the 6 organizations, the campaign managed to inspire minds and quickly became a truly global civil society movement, uniting hundreds of organizations around the world, big and small, under the common goal of a total ban on anti-personnel landmines. And this call materialized relatively quickly in 1997, so just 5 years after the campaign was created, through the adoption of the Mine Ban Treaty that prohibited the use, production, transfer, and stockpiling of all anti-personnel mines and obliged their destruction. As mentioned by the ambassador, it was an absolutely exceptional, unprecedented, and groundbreaking achievement, as never before had a conventional weapon been banned. And this was thanks to the truly unique, exceptional, close partnership between civil society united under under the ICBL umbrella, and the states under the Canadian leadership, the International Committee of the Red Cross, and the United Nations. During the Ottawa process that led to adoption of the treaty, NGOs, landmine survivors like RED, and experts were sitting at the negotiations table as equals. This has never happened before in multilateral diplomacy. And soon after the adoption, again, I will be bragging a bit about the Nobel Peace Prize. Soon after the adoption of the treaty in September of 1997, soon after the campaign and its funding, coordinator Jody Williams were awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for, as the Nobel Committee said at that time, starting a process which in the space of a few years changed a ban on anti-personnel mines from a vision to a feasible reality. And this year, the ICBL turned 30 years old, and we are still working to indeed fully turn this vision into a reality. I'm also very pleased to say that this something that we started as the campaign has not only been actually limited to anti-personnel landmines. We saw that this innovative process initiated by Canada and by ICBL that led to achieving the treaty has since served as a model for other humanitarian disarmament initiatives, as the 2008 Convention on Cluster Munitions and the Treaty on Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, adopted in 2017, and hopefully some others in the future. So now let me turn to the monitor. Still a bit of a history. Very soon after adoption and signing of the treaty in 1997, the campaign realized the convention would need a monitoring and reporting system in order to know what's happening on the ground and to document progress and challenges to inform global advocacy efforts. And so in 1998, the campaign's watchdog is born, and a year later, the first annual landmine monitor report sees the daylight, and that coincides with the treaty's entry into force in 1999. And again, this was the very first time that civil society organized itself to provide a monitoring regime for a humanitarian law and disarmament convention. At that time, it was absolutely unprecedented, groundbreaking concept that since then inspired many similar initiatives, as for instance, the Arms Trade Treaty Monitor. Today, the annual Landmine Monitor report is considered the source for everything related to the treaty and global mine action efforts, and we hope that it will continue this way. The monitor system features a global civil society reporting network, country profiles available online, as well as annual global reports that are both available online and printed. This year is the 24th edition of the Landmine Monitor, and throughout the years it has served as de facto monitoring regime for the convention, gathering and providing indispensable information on the implementation of and compliance with the treaty. As well as since 2008, the monitor took on monitoring and reporting on the Convention on Cluster Munitions and also releases annual cluster munition monitor reports. By very meticulous, continuous research, the monitor uncovers trends in mine action and the implementation of the treaty, informs decision makers, and influences policy and action. It also serves as a great advocacy tool for the campaign, a starter for an exchange, for a conversation. So its role for the campaign and for the global mine ban efforts cannot be overstated, as we all know what happens when no one is watching. So let me say a few words about what have we seen in terms of the impact the treaty has made over the past 25 years, and also very much through the monitor process. As already mentioned before, the Mine Ban Treaty remains one of the most universally accepted and adhered to the disarmament treaty today. With 164 states, or 80% of the world on board, and most of those remaining outside, actually respecting the ban norm and key treaty provisions. The latest UNGA vote in the first committee on the annual resolution of the convention, with record high numbers of votes in favor, including by many states remaining outside, is just an example of the strong stigma attached to anti-personnel landmines and the respect for the convention's norms. We do, however, want all of the remaining 33 states to formally accede, renounce the weapon, and therefore universalization coverage needs to continue and is indispensable until the very last country joins formally. Secondly, the use of anti-personnel landmines has dropped significantly over the past 25 years. And as mentioned before, currently we have two governments only, Russia using landmines in Ukraine and Myanmar, as well as several non-state armed groups in a handful of countries, including Myanmar, Colombia, DRC, and India. Another achievement of the treaty has been that anti-personnel mine production has become very limited and transfer has virtually ceased. But perhaps most important, and this is again something that has been always at the center of the convention, it's the people. We always say this was a gift to the people, gift to humanity, a treaty that is centered around the people. And we have had probably the most inspiring achievement is that we have seen far less casualties since the treaty has entered into force. In most affected states parties, the drop has been dramatic. For instance, in Cambodia, casualties have gone from over 4,000 a year in the 90s to 40 casualties last year. It means that the treaty has been saving thousands of lives and limbs. We have, however, seen surge in casualty numbers to unacceptable levels in a few locations affected by ongoing hostilities, in particular due to the use of improvised mines, such as in Syria, Afghanistan, Colombia, Iraq, Mali, Nigeria, and Yemen, as well as Myanmar, of course. Over the past 25 years, states have destroyed over 55 million of stockpiled mines, as mentioned by the ambassador, and cleared very large areas contaminated by mines and other explosive ordnance, with over 30 countries becoming completely mine-free. However, we cannot pause to celebrate that for too long, since we still have 60 countries around the world that are contaminated by anti-personnel mines, including 33 treaty states parties. And this is why sustained attention and funding are vital to accelerate the pace of clearance so more communities and countries can be freed from this threat as quickly as possible. We were encouraged just several days ago, actually sitting in Geneva for the annual meeting of states parties, to listen to Cambodia's announcement of a breakthrough in negotiations between Thailand and Cambodia in regards to the demining of the common border, which has been a challenge for many years. So we were very encouraged to hear that an agreement at high level has been reached to demine the border before its final demarcation. And we applaud both governments for doing this. And we very strongly hope that this means that both countries will clear as soon as possible and will become indeed mine-free by 2025, which is an aspirational goal for states parties to achieve completion and to become mine-free. Lastly, thanks to the treaty, victim assistance has been recognized as a state's obligation and people's right, and there have been significant ongoing efforts to improve the quality and access to services. But of course, much more needs to be done in this area. Concluding, I would like to say that it is indisputable that the achievement by the treaty has been impressive, and it's been working on the ground, saving lives and livelihoods. But unfortunately, new and protracted conflicts and competing priorities in many countries and also globally has created new challenges, and that's why further sustained efforts and funding are indispensable and needed, plentiful, in order to deliver on this promise of a mine-free community, mine-free country, and ultimately a mine-free world. Therefore, the ICBL will, of course, continue watching, reporting, speaking up, and pushing for more action on the ground and progress until our common job is fully done and we see and hear no more of landmines. And of course, we are determined to achieve it in our lifetime. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's really, when you listen to the achievements of the ICBL over just the last 20 some odd years, it's really very impressive that a grassroots movement could result in such amazing change and the saving of so many lives. And this is certainly very, very impressive. So I want to thank you for that summary. Next, we're going to listen to Ms. Marion Guillamont from Humanity and Inclusion, which was previously known to me and others as Handicap International. She is their Disarmament and Protection of Civilians Advocacy Officer, and she's going to speak about why the global landmine has been so important, the importance of the treaty addressing disability issues, and how it's been a model for the rights-based approach to victim assistance. So, Marion, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for inviting Humanity and Inclusion, as you said, previously known as Handicap International. So a bit of this story as well. As you know, Humanity and Inclusion has been founded in 1982 to orthopedically fit thousands of mine amputees on the Thai-Cambodian border. Actually, the first HI project aimed to provide services that included the provision of prosthetics to 6,000 Cambodian refugees who had been injured or lost limbs in mine accidents. So during the 80s, at the border, HI, but also, Kasia, as you mentioned, other NGOs, of course, witnessed the humanitarian consequences and suffering caused by landmines. Of course, we all know that landmines kill, injure people, but they also cause psychological and psychosocial damage. They can also affect people's livelihood and can result in social marginalization. And being a landmine survivor triggers a kind of chain reaction that can lead to disability and exclusion sometimes. First, the injury often results in amputation, and without a necessary rehabilitation, it can cause lifelong disability. Secondly, the person may lose its employment and income due to discriminatory attitudes, for instance. And if this person is the sole breadwinner, the whole family can be affected and be in poverty situation. Thirdly, losing a limb can cause depression due to the way that society most of the times perceives person with disabilities. Then prejudice towards person with disability can lead to exclusion from all other aspects of social life. And you can also have additional barriers such as inaccessible buildings, inaccessible information, discriminatory policies and laws. And these barriers can often mean that the rights of persons with disabilities are not respected or realized. And in addition, during the 90s, the circumstances changed. We had at that moment more long asymmetrical conflicts, intensive use of explosive weapons and of landmines. So this led to the emergence of a new form of non-military mine clearance, and namely the humanitarian mine clearance, which started to develop in the 90s. So at that moment, mine clearance became a humanitarian issue. And while the objective was not the same, I mean, the objective of this humanitarian mine clearance was not the same. And it was the experts were coming were trying to work with the local communities to understand better and to prioritize the land clearance activities. And the objective was to clear the essential areas as fast as possible so community life can return to normal. So, so yeah, that's what HI, but also other NGOs were witnessing during the 80s and 90s. So by witnessing this humanitarian impact of landmines, two main elements became clear. The first one was that providing care and prosthetics was not a sufficient response to the distress of people. So HI decided, in order to address the issue, that the best way to move forward was to take the problem as its source and tackle the use of landmines. So HI decided to make the eradication of anti-personnel mines a political battle. So in 1992, we published our first reports on anti-personnel mine in Cambodia. And well, HI and other NGOs called the international community to take action against this weapon. And as previously mentioned by my colleagues on this panel, in 1992, ICBL has been created by 6 NGOs, including by Human Rights Watch, NHI, and of course, other NGOs. So a total ban was seen as the only solution to protect civilians who were actually the main victims of this indiscriminate use. And the second main element that became clear at that moment is that people affected by landmines needed to be at the center of this international agreement. And these international agreements needed to address disability issues. As I said previously, the raison d'être of HI since its creation has always been to provide treatments and care to people injured by landmines and also help them to access their rights. So that's naturally that HI pushed to include in the Ottawa Treaty a commitment for states to provide assistance to victims. And now we know that when we say victims, we mean people injured and killed by landmines, their families, and also affected communities. So it's the APMBC actually who addressed assistance to victims by codifying the concept. It was mentioned in the preamble of the treaty and in a provision concerning international cooperation and assistance. So at that moment, there was not a fully dedicated article to VA. So VA becomes a mandatory provision of the Ottawa Treaty, and every state that were joining or still join today the treaty has the duty to assist victims through the implementation of specific activities or to financially support such activities. And later, in 2003, with the Protocol 5 on explosive remnant of war to the CCM, plus the Convention on Cluster Munition in 2008, these two treaties included an article fully dedicated to the needs of victims, together with their rights to receive victims. And I'm not going into details, but about the CCM, for instance, we have now this fully dedicated article to VA, and what has been added in comparison to the APMBC is the psychological support and as well the data collection. And there is as well a sub-article describing more precisely how states can fulfill this obligation and more concretely assist victims. Then, well, yes, there had been as well the adoption of the CRPD in 2007, the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability, which at that time represented a turning point in the advancement of the right-based approach of persons with disability, including survivors. Because still now, but at that time as well, there was this common thinking in disarmament treaties that it wasn't enough to talk about VA in the framework of these disarmament treaties, but that VA should also be included in development, humanitarian, and human rights framework. And finally, VA has been also incorporated in several political declarations. Most recently, there is a fully dedicated article to VA in the political declaration to address the humanitarian impacts caused by the use of explosive weapons in populated areas, which has been adopted in November. So yeah, the Ottawa Treaty really paved the way to a right-based approach for victim assistance in other disarmament processes, with always this final objective and ultimate goal to facilitate access for victims to services and respond to their needs. And to conclude, I just would like to remind that a landmine-free world doesn't mean or doesn't equate to a victim-free or impact-free world. And I think it has been highlighted by Ambassador Tyler at the beginning of this panel. Because yes, meeting short, medium and long-term needs of women, girls, boys, and men who have been injured by explosive ordnance and addressing the needs of affected communities and affected families is a long-lasting obligation, even after the completion of clearance. So yes, it has been said as well, but a lot has been done during 25 years after the adoption of the Ottawa Treaty, but a lot as well needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I'm going to turn the mic over to Yeshua. Yeshua Moser-Puangsuwan is the research coordinator for the Asia Pacific of the Landmine Monitor. He's here with us in the clubhouse, and he's going to say a few words.
Thank you, Phil. The Landmine Monitor takes a look at the entire world through... Closer to the mic, okay.
Yes, please, yeah.
Through the convention. So that's clear for governments who've joined the convention. Are they meeting their obligations? But we also take a look at other governments that haven't yet joined the convention. And are they doing something which is in line with the convention's goals? Or are they doing something that is against the core things that we want to prohibit? Obviously, use of landmines would be the main one that we would be concerned about. And in recent years, Myanmar had stood alone, but this year they were joined by Russian use in Ukraine. Determining new use in the Ukraine has been relatively easy for us because Ukraine was a state party to the mine ban treaty. There were mine clearance organizations there. And the mine clearance engineers were able to say, hey, we've never come across these types of mines before. This is the types we're finding. And we were able to determine new use very easily. So I'm going to spend most of my time talking about how we determine new use in Myanmar, because it's a country that does not have public records available. It's very opaque in its policies and practices. And this picture here is typical of the type of thing we might be sent by somebody, even outside of Myanmar, even in another country, that's an allegation of use. And from a picture like this, we really can't tell anything. You could take a model of a mine and stick it in your front yard and come up with a picture like this. So we need something more than this. My favorite story of a picture taking on a life of its own happened in India, where almost every television channel republished the same picture of mines that were supposedly just laid on the border between Pakistan and India by the nefarious Pakistanis. And nobody ever did their research to find out they were showing pictures of Indian-made landmines. So by a picture like this, we can't tell anything. What we need is context. What can we see that places the mine in a location? Now this is context. This video shows the anti-personnel mines in the foreground there, and it shows you where they are. Some of you may recognize this as coming from the Myanmar-Bangladesh border in 2017. And prior to seeing this video, I had some eyewitness accounts of people who were standing on the border, and they said, yeah, right across the border, they were laying the mines right in front of us. And I discounted those statements because I said, you're standing there and they're laying mines right in front of you? Come on, aren't they going to, they're not going to allow that to happen. And then when I saw this video, I realized they are. They're right there at the line and they can see it happen. And these, there are other video images which I have showing them being pulled out of the ground with shovels by ordinary people, something we do not recommend you do. And they were on a clear path that had clearly been regularly used. So this was, to us, with all of the context, a identification of new use that we could make on that border at that time. Now, I can tell you something, which it hasn't made it into our reports yet, that there was more new use on that border in October and November of this year. And again, we have enough evidence that we feel confident in saying that. So context is a thing that we need. In the past year, there has been a lot of weaponry that's shown up on social media in the country. And this is something that's kind of new in the Myanmar situation. I won't go into all of the details about why it's new, but this is another form of information for us. As PDF groups and ethnic armed organizations overrun various outposts of the Myanmar armed forces, or in some or another way capture weapons held by patrols or porters, they show them off. And so we go through these pictures and we comb them for anti-personnel mines, which we found in this particular picture. These are from Bago region, and there are MM1 and MM6 Myanmar armed forces manufactured anti-personnel mines with mixed in a bunch of other weaponry that they captured. And this fits something that Myanmar Armed Forces officers actually said to me. They said, we use mines in our frontline areas where our numbers are very few and where people are shooting at us. And these weapons are recovered from frontline troops. They are lightly armed and they don't carry much that they aren't using. So again, this is for us, along with other information that we have in those areas, something that we can peg new use on. This is weaponry that was captured by the Arakan Army on the other side of the country. And there are MM1, MM2, MM5, and MM6 anti-personnel mines in this cache of weapons, which was seized in Mongdaw. And from January to December, we found evidence of mines captured from the Myanmar Armed Forces by ethnic armed groups and PDFs every month during the year. In at least, we have at least 28 images now we've captured where we've identified Myanmar Armed Forces made anti-personnel mines. The picture in the upper left is the type of picture we really appreciate people sending in, and rarely do they do it. And that's because it's got manufacturing dates visible on it. Normally, people don't show us that in an image, or they're not focused their camera on it, it's blurred, we can't get it. But in this case, we were able to identify 2018 as the last year during which Myanmar surely has produced anti-personnel mines. We don't have any production dates on any mines any later than that yet. The lower right-hand corner I kind of threw in because it was an amusing, it had an amusing story with it. It was in a set of images given to media groups by the Kachin Independence Army of mines that supposedly they'd pulled out of the ground that the Myanmar Armed Forces had laid. And I showed this to a Myanmar Armed Forces officer, and he said, "There's an anti-vehicle mine there. We don't use anti-vehicle mines. The ethnic armed groups don't have vehicles." Well, that's interesting. Starting this year, an enormous amount of infrastructure has been mined around the country. In the upper left-hand corner, you have a picture of a mobile phone tower, and you'll notice a brush fence around it. Well, in April of this year, Katie Kine, a 15-year-old girl, was herding her animals in that area, and they hadn't finished building the fence yet, and she got one of her animals from inside the fence, stepped on an anti-personnel mine, and lost her leg. This has been happening around a number of infrastructure projects besides mobile phone towers, also pipelines, mineral extraction mines, and electrical power lines do have mines laid around them. They may have brush fences like this. This is not adequate fencing in our opinion. These will deteriorate in a year or two due to weather and insects. And in most cases, it's not marked. Now, it would be great if this is how we find mined areas, that there's a sign on it. But you would have to be awfully lucky in Myanmar to find one of these. There are only a couple of locations I've ever received pictures that they've actually put up a mine warning sign. And this was in an area where supposedly the Myanmar Armed Forces had removed some mines and resettled some internally displaced people back in their villages. I think I'll stop there and turn it back over to Phil.
Thank you very much for that, Yeshua. We've got some time for questions. We have a microphone at the back of the hall if anyone would like to ask a question. If you'd like to ask a question, please identify yourself and your affiliation, if any, and also indicate who you're directing the question to. You can obviously direct it to multiple speakers if you'd like. I'm going to use the moderator's prerogative to actually ask a Myanmar-specific question, which is, to what extent, Yeshua, and also Tom, are you seeing landmine use also by the ethnic armed organizations? The extent that this is, really spreading into the resistance, which of course is trying to resist the encroachment of the Myanmar military, and to what extent is there pressure on those ethnic organizations to not use landmines?
Tom, I'll let you go first.
Well, Phil, there's evidence that, in fact, PDFs are using landmines, and this has increased the massive problem, the danger, and the casualties being suffered by the people of Myanmar. I think we need to be putting a lot of attention on this, and it is imperative, I believe, that the international community, the NUG within and PDFs within Myanmar, just to recognize this as the serious problem that it is. Now, but just to make it very clear, the junta's military forces have been using, as I mentioned in my remarks, landmines for a very long time, and we know that they are significantly expanded the laying of landmines, and those areas of Myanmar that are now extraordinarily dangerous have expanded significantly and ominously. So we need to be clear about the primary offender of this problem, but we also need to recognize that PDFs have also been engaged in the use of landmines, and it is imperative that pressure be placed on all sides of this conflict to stop the use of landmines. So we have a lot of work to do.
Yeshua, do you have anything you'd like to add to that, or?
Sure. In the images that I said we collected over the years of this last year of anti-personnel mines seized by ethnic armed organizations and PDFs, not a single one of them reported destruction of those weapons. And have you heard of any incidents where they haven't used the weapons they've seized? We also have images from the other side, of course, which show us that there are improvised anti-personnel mines made by some of the PDF groups at this point in time, and the ethnic armed organizations have been making improvised anti-personnel landmines for a long time. But one of the things right now we're seeing is just this incredible transfer of weaponry, including anti-personnel mines, to ethnic armed groups and PDFs from the captures that they've advertised.
Okay. Question, go ahead, please. Identify yourself.
Good evening. Is this clear enough? Yes.
Yes, you can hear you.
Yes, good evening and thank you everyone. My name is Stephanie Lee. I am New Zealand's Chargé d'Affaires and Head of Mission in Yangon, or I will be next Monday. Thank you so much to everyone for the really important presentations. My question is probably mostly to Yeshua, maybe to others, maybe to Thomas, but it's, what can I do? You know, we have a small presence in Yangon. We have, because of our political settings, some limited ability to engage with some of those on the ground. But what is the most useful thing that we could do, particularly in country, but also sort of feeding the story out to our head office and through there, of course, to New York, to Geneva, to other places? What can we do? Thank you.
Thank you.
Tom, why don't you go for that first?
Well, it's a very good question, and I hope that it's a question that governments will continue to ask and to act on. The fact of the matter is, the international community, frankly, has failed the people of Myanmar. There is an unwillingness to provide the kind of coordinated strategic pressure on the junta to be able to do, for example, the people of Myanmar that I talk with, very supportive of the people of Ukraine, very sympathetic to the people of Ukraine, but they are just absolutely, it's incomprehensible why the United Nations could act in 4 days, take action in 4 days, that they have yet to take with respect to 4 days with respect to Ukraine, that they have yet to take 18 months after the coup in Myanmar. And I'm not talking about military engagement. I'm talking about cutting off the sources of revenue and weapons that are being used by this junta against the people of Myanmar. So we have a long, long, long way to go. And I would hope that those who are like yourself, who are about to be on the ground in Myanmar, continue to reflect this message that governments need to be monitoring the situation very, very closely. They should not in any way legitimize this very illegitimate government. They should recognize that the so-called elections that are being planned, quote unquote, are not going to be elections whatsoever. It's a ruse and a farce that we need to declare as such. And that significantly greater pressure needs to be placed on this primary source of the problem that we're discussing here, the junta and its military forces, and at the same time engage those who are using weapons, including landmines, in their campaign against against the military. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but I believe it has to start with the international community providing much stronger opposition to the junta, cutting off the resources that they need to continue the scourge, providing increased humanitarian aid to Myanmar. It's unbelievable how just a small percentage of the UN Emergency Fund is being funded, and how the CSOs, NGOs who are on the front lines providing help and services to those who are victims of landmines and others with humanitarian aid are dramatically under-resourced. So we have a long way to go.
I agree fully with Tom. I have a public comment and a private. Obviously, the second one will come later. Your predecessor there had an interesting point of view because he was formerly with the ILO, which had a very interesting and complicated agreement with the military. And I think there's a role for you to play there specifically on this for lack of a better term, oath of fealty that is being put on non-governmental organizations. And this is really sending a chill through civil society organizing in the country. And so picking a civil society group to champion on that, I would champion disability organizations in that framework. And I think that you're not going to get much hostility and pushback if you start championing those organizations for having freer ability to move around without these onerous new restrictions that they're trying to put in place.
Okay, do we have any more questions from the floor? Please go ahead. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Tom McInerney. I'm the director of the Rule of Law program at Loyola University Chicago School of Law. And I have a question, I think, maybe for Phil or maybe from a representative from Handicap International about the victim assistance issue and maybe what's being done in terms of the synergies between the APM convention and the CRPD, and also, perhaps also to Tom about what's happening, or if anything can be done in terms of the situation in Myanmar relating to victim assistance, because interestingly, Myanmar is a party to the CRPD, and that are they living up to their obligations in that area? That might provide some basis for advocacy, or also providing assistance to victims that seem to be increasing. Thanks.
I put my Human Rights Watch hat on. What I can say is certainly that the CRPD has been ratified by all the ASEAN nations. And so there is a unanimity within ASEAN as a bloc that, you know, the obligations of that convention are something that the member states of ASEAN want to implement. That said, the situation in Myanmar has become one where, regardless of what they've actually promised, the situation is well beyond their control. And I think actually, I hate to say it, that, you know, issues of disability rights is probably the last thing that the SAC junta and others are thinking about in Myanmar at this time. I would hope that there can be a concerted effort by the ASEAN to pressure Myanmar, not only on issues of rights, but also, of course, peace and these other things, and trying to resolve the situation. And then that there will be willingness to provide support for some sort of transitional government if, in fact, we end up with a change of regime there in terms of, a more rights-respecting democratic government. Right now, it's going the opposite way. This whole effort to try to push through elections, which are not going to be free and fair, as Tom said very clearly, is something that the Myanmar junta is focused on. And what we've seen with the Myanmar junta in the past, and this goes back to previous iterations of military rule in Myanmar, is that I remember very clearly that after the terrible tragedy of Typhoon Nargis, which killed hundreds of thousands of people, literally hundreds of thousands of people in the Delta, that that time in 2008, the then military government was not prepared to allow humanitarians into those areas because they were focused on holding a referendum for their 2008 constitution. And this single-minded sort of focus on whatever's important to the military and disregarding whatever is possibly for the benefit of the Myanmar people, I think is one of the reasons why the Myanmar people are really quite tired of this military government and resisting the effort to try to reimpose military control over the country. And I think if there was some sort of significant change, I think there'd be a whole package of possible assistance to Myanmar for a new government that didn't include the people who are committing atrocity crimes against the people of Myanmar right now. Anybody else want to speak to that, or?
Let me just add, Phil, that I know of people in the disability community, organizations that are advocating for people with disabilities have described to me just how the impact this is having on many people with disabilities. People with disabilities are sometimes unaware that there's a threat to their community, to their village, and become victims. They are unable to escape attacks, the burning of homes, thousands of homes, the attacking of villages. And I've spoken to some disability advocates who have found it no longer, they could no longer function within the country. They've had to escape from the country because of persecution of themselves. So we've got a major, major problem in Myanmar, and with respect to the disability community, and I'm afraid it's only getting worse.
Yep. Would you like to say something? Please go ahead, H.I.
Thank you. Yes, no, I just wanted to go back on the synergies between the CRPD and the APNDC. Like in terms of contents, you have a lot of synergies, like regarding, for instance, the Article 11, according to which state party of the CRPD should ensure protection and safety of persons with disability in emergency contexts and armed violence context as well. And as well, if you look at the Oslo Action Plan, and more specifically the Action 33, which is the first action of the victim assistance part, I think you have inside all the key principles that are embedded in the CRPD, according, like, such as removing all kind of barriers. But then, well, it has been mentioned before, like there are still huge, Myanmar signed the CRPD, but you have huge needs in terms of victim assistance regarding having access to health infrastructure, huge need as well in terms of inclusive humanitarian action. So yes, we still have persons with disabilities struggling to have access to health facilities, and also huge problem in terms of accessing livelihoods.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. There are other questions from the floor? If not, I want to thank the panel, both from afar, who have joined us this evening, as well as Yeshua, who is here with us in the club and who played a very critical role in helping organize this panel. I want to thank Ambassador Sarah Taylor for making time today to come and speak about the very important role that Canada played and continues to play in the effort to ban landmines globally. And I want to thank you all for your attention and your time on this very important 25th anniversary of the ICBL's winning of the Nobel Peace Prize. So again, thank you very much, and good night.
Thank you, Red. Thank you, Kasia. Thank you, Marianne. Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Yeshua. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.